Civil War is the 13th official movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's also the third Captain America movie, as well as some kind of Avengers movie. They also have to set up two new characters, those of Black Panther and Spiderman, while also making a cohesive and great movie all on its own. This movie is asked to juggle a ton and had huge expectations to rule this summer's box office. And yet somehow, with all the world's weight on their shoulders, Anthony and Joe Russo pull it off in fantastic fashion. The story features an ever-evolving web of political maneuvering as well as some more personal drama between individual characters and their role in their universe. This is juxtaposed with a villain whose plan is intelligent and makes sense for who he is. As he says in the movie, he knows he can't destroy the Avengers. Stronger men than him have tried and failed, but an alliance that crumbles from within can never truly recover. After the opening scene ends in the destruction of a Wakandan assembly, 117 countries have come together to sign the Sokovian Accords. These accords are an argument that has to be addressed in this universe. 13 films in, and after multiple city destructions, there has to be some kind of talk for ramifications for our heroes. As General Ross puts it, they're a superpowered team with no alliance to any country that regularly ignores sovereign borders to choose whoever they want to go after, and have little care for the devastation they leave behind. Not to mention they don't know where Hulk or Thor are located at the moment. So oversight appears to be the answer the world has come up with. The proposed accords will have the Avengers operate under a UN panel when and if they deem it necessary. Vision makes another interesting point about something that has always been a discussion in the comics, that since Tony's coming out as Iron Man, the number of potentially world-ending events has increased as well. He says their strength breeds challenge, which in turn breeds catastrophe. I'm glad these questions are finally being discussed in the MCU because it's important for us to know where our heroes stand in the eyes of the public and the government. It's similar to the discussion Batman vs. Superman was trying to have, but it's done in a much more competent and complex way. Now let's talk a little bit about the action, because holy crap, this movie has hands down the best action sequence in any superhero movie ever. When the Avengers Civil War finally comes to blows at the airport, the action is so well crafted to each character's strengths and weaknesses. Like when Hawkeye shoots Ant-Man on an arrow so he can sabotage Tony's suit from within. Or when War Machine uses a sonic weapon to incapacitate Scarlet Witch. Just as they did with Captain America Winter Soldier, the Russo brothers did an amazing job of raising the stakes and building characters throughout action, while also introducing multiple new wrinkles to characters' abilities, like they did with Falcon, for example. There's so many other amazing action sequences, there are almost too many to talk about. Now for me, most of the time when I go to these movies, I'm really not looking for action. I'm really interested more in the characters. But in this movie especially, the action was just amazing. You couldn't look away. There's a great scene at the beginning when they're chasing Crossbones in what feels like prime comic book Crossbones material. He's got the suit, he's set up, he is ready to go, and he wants another shot at Cap. And by God, he's gonna get one. Now this dude's smart too. I mean, he starts out with a noob tube on the back of his truck. He's not messing around with Cap. I mean, when it finally comes to blows and he knows he's got to go toe-to-toe with Cap, his first move is to bomb that shield. So Cap's got to throw it up in the air. Now he doesn't have a shield. Now Crossbones can come right at him with these enhanced punch gloves. And come at Cap, he sure as hell does. He's got major beef with the guy after he, quote, dropped a building on him. And he's not going to let him get out of there alive. Even when he seems beat, when he's beaten down to his knees, he still is not going to do anything but take him with him. So he pulls the pin on his grenade, and Scarlet Witch just barely manages to save Cap from what would have been a very terrible start to Civil War. But she can't quite contain it, and she loses control of the explosion as she tries to raise it out of the city. And this is what actually ends up resulting in these Wakandan deaths. And kind of giving Scarlet Witch something that she needs to make reparations for. I mean, she struggles with this decision and what she caused in Wakanda for the rest of the movie. It's not something that can just be lightly passed over as it is in the DC universe. Now, this was actually one of the most glaring things I found that I did not like in this movie. The fact that they killed Crossbones. We finally had an awesome villain who could stand up to Cap, who had a personal vendetta against Cap, and who could have interacted with so many other characters in this universe, but they just blow him up in his first real scene. I mean, oh my gosh, mid-fight, all I could think about was, oh my gosh, this guy's awesome. I can't wait to see him in so many other things. He's got a great actor behind him. I'd love to see some kind of Marvel season of like him versus the Punisher or something like that. Oh, no, he blew up. All right, he already blew up. Oh my gosh. What else did I expect from the Marvel movies? I mean, get a good villain, you kill him off. If he's not that good, keep him alive. But don't worry, we've got a lot of great things to talk about with this movie. While we're talking about villains, though, let's go ahead and get into Baron Zemo. Now, Zemo had a great plan that actually ended up working out in the end. I mean, he really did get everything he wanted. Well, not quite everything. He didn't get the bullet in his brain that he was looking for. But other than that, I mean, the Avengers are fractured, and half of them are off doing who knows what as they broke out of prison. So, I mean, his plan couldn't have gone much better. I was a bit underwhelmed initially when I saw this simple guy. I was kind of expecting something a little bit closer to his comic book character, but I can understand how that would have been hard to get across on film. But this movie isn't supposed to be a Zemo vehicle anyways, and I actually ended up being glad that he was a little more laid back and wasn't as huge of a character chewing all the scenery he could find, because I think that would have distracted from what we were actually going to the theater for, which was Civil War. Hero against hero, ideology against ideology. I mean, it was nice to have Zemo in here, and he created a nice third act change that I didn't see coming, but I think any more and he would have been overbearing on the movie as a whole. So I'm actually glad they did what they did with Zemo. And hey, maybe in the next movie he'll get his face burnt up a bunch and he'll have to wear that dope purple cloth over his head, because I would love to see that. So with a movie this big and with so many characters, I think what I'm going to do now is just go through each of the characters' story on their own and try to pick out some of the good and the bad from each. We might as well start with the man of the hour, Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. Cap is back and sporting the stripes and stars. Every movie his suit has changed slightly, and this movie is no exception, but it might be his best suit so far. His action has stepped up as well. He's able to use his shield in a number of innovative ways, from containing a grenade to absorbing the shock from a 40-foot fall. Cap comes into the Sokovian Accords with an experience of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s oversight being undermined by the fact that they were invaded by Hydra, and he doesn't exactly believe this is the path they should be following. He knows that his job is to save as many people as he can, but if the Avengers didn't exist, or they couldn't operate when they needed to, maybe next time nobody would get saved. And even though tensions are high in the room during this imperative debate, when Cap gets a text telling him Peggy's passed away, he's gone. This is just one last great moment showing us how much Cap really cared about her, and how much she meant to him even now, even in her old age. He still couldn't get past that one last dance he missed. At her funeral, he expressed how much it meant when he realized that there was still somebody from his old life who was alive. And now that she's gone, this only strengthens his bond with his best friend and blast from the past, Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, and his need to truly get him back. Peggy has one last bit of advice for Cap at her funeral, something communicated to Cap through her niece, Sharon Carter, who is now working with the CIA in Berlin, and who was the woman who was spying on him from across the hall in Winter Soldier, or as she puts it, doing her job. Sharon recounts an old phrase that Peggy used to say to her: "Compromise when you can, but when you can't, don't. It's on you to look the world in the eye and to tell them, no, you move." And this is something that helps Cap make his decision regarding the Sokovian Accords and what he will do for the rest of the movie. Not long after Peggy's funeral, the Wakandan king is killed by who appears to be the Winter Soldier, so Steve has to jump into action to save his old friend from being taken in by the Avengers. After eluding the Berlin police in one of the more electrifying action sequences, Steve and Bucky are eventually brought in by the Avengers. However, it appears that this was Zemo's plan all along, as he impersonates the man who is set to interrogate Bucky, and then releases his inner Winter Soldier with the codebook he found after S.H.I.E.L.D. released the files on Hydra. This is when Steve realizes that there's more than meets the eye going on here. And Bucky tells him that there are more Winter Soldiers than just him. Steve realizes that Zemo's trying to get to these soldiers, and that it's their responsibility to stop him before they can. As Bucky puts it, the rest of these Winter Soldiers are bigger and badder than him, and can ostensibly take over an entire nation in one night without anybody being the wiser. However, once Steve and Bucky finally reach where the Winter Soldiers are hidden, it appears Zemo's already killed all of them, and that this wasn't Zemo's plan at all. That's when Iron Man shows up to complete Zemo's plan. Zemo shows video of the Winter Soldier killing Iron Man's parents, and it just all goes to hell from there. Steve does everything he can to protect his friend from his other friend. In the aftermath of one of the most emotional scenes in the entire cinematic universe, Steve gives up his shield. He gives up everything for Bucky. And this really does encapsulate who Steve is. And the death of Peggy especially helps reinforce his bond with Bucky into something that can't be broken and probably won't be broken anytime soon. Now, moving on to Iron Man. This Iron Man is unlike any we've seen before. Tony Stark is broken. He's vulnerable, guilt-ridden, and alone. We've never seen him like this. I mean, we got a glimpse of it in Iron Man 3, but certainly not to this extent. Certainly not done this well. Tony is still guilt-ridden over the destruction he's caused, especially in Sokovia, where his creation of Ultron killed so many, including the son of a woman who confronts Tony in Civil War. In this state, Tony is fully behind the Accords. He sees it as needed oversight that is inevitably be going to happen anyways, and they might as well be a part of it rather than have it done to them at a later date. He wants to make sure the Avengers stay together, because to him it's staying together that's more important than how they stay together. But unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. But this is probably the best and most interesting Iron Man performance since the first Iron Man, or perhaps the first Avengers film. It's imperative we talk about Bucky because Bucky is a huge part of the plot of this movie. Now, Bucky is on his own and he's still conflicted about his true feelings towards Cap and what his past friendship with Steve and how it influences his world today. When Bucky is framed for the assassination of the Wakandan king T'Chaka, the Avengers are called in to bring him in, and Black Panther is out for revenge. But Cap is willing to put it all on the line to save his best bud. So Cap and Bucky have to fight their way through waves of SWAT troopers to escape. Bucky has some great moments, including punching through the floor to his hiding spot past Cap's shoulder and tossing the bag over to the next building without a look. And another great moment when he wields the battering ram for a short while. Both he and Cap have a very Daredevil-like stair sequence that is just as fantastic as it is in Daredevil. And it's not really stealing if you rip it from your own company, right? When Bucky is captured, however, he's activated by his old mission book and reverts back to the ruthless Winter Soldier, until Cap can bring him to a stop during his helicopter escape. I mean, Cap literally wills this helicopter back to the ground. He's got one hand on the helicopter, and he's got one hand on the little bar next to him, and he just will not let go. This is a perfect view of what Captain America is. He will just not give up no matter what the stakes if he believes what he's doing is right. Bucky was also the one who killed Tony's parents and the recipient of Iron Man's rage during the climax of the movie, where Bucky ends up losing his metal arm. Bucky was entirely enjoyable in this movie and even had great comedic moments with Falcon a couple of times. I really think they developed a real cool and interesting rapport with each other, although clearly wasn't a likable rapport. He also provides a great personal connection for Cap that is a joy to watch on screen. Unfortunately, he is put on ice at the end of this movie until they can find a way to get the Winter Soldier out of him completely, which is completely understandable. Falcon was not one of my favorite Avengers. I barely even considered Falcon an Avenger. I mean, Falcon was basically just a guy who happened to be lucky enough to get a cool backpack. But not in this movie. Falcon was my breakout Avenger of the movie, following on the heels of other great breakout Avengers like Hulk in his first Avengers movie, or Hawkeye in the second Avengers. Falcon took a small part he was given and knocked it out of the park. Right off the bat, he shows off a number of new and innovative additions to his suit, including his versatile wing shields that can also be used as close-range weapons, and his charming robotic helper Red Wing. Red Wing helps to make him the illustrious tech guy who can also go into the field, all wrapped up into one flying arsenal. I just thought Falcon was fantastic. As I've said previously, he had a lot of cool comedic moments with the Winter Soldier, and I thought he was a joy to watch. Scarlet Witch was another Avenger I wasn't that excited to see in this movie. And boy was I proven wrong. Scarlet Witch also grew a lot in my eyes coming out of this movie. The devastation to the Wakandan assembly was partially her fault, and the mistake haunts her for the rest of the film. Cap tries to let her know that saving people is important and that it wasn't all her fault, because he did make mistakes too. When the group splits, she holds off on signing the Accords, and she eventually ends up siding with Cap, as one would expect given her animosity towards Tony. She learns shortly thereafter that Tony has instructed Vision to keep her within the Avengers compound, not for her own safety, but for the safety of others. When she asks Vision, "What do you want?" he replies, "For people to see you, as I do." Since they're both trapped at the compound, this gives them both a chance to interact for the first time on their own on screen, and develop their budding relationship. This was a nice bit of levity in a huge blockbuster where we can watch what is hopefully the beginning of the relationship that these two have in the comics. I loved the scene where they were just cooking and she tried to explain to him that it wasn't paprika and his only defense was that he'd never really eaten food before. They also have a connection during the discussion around the Accords, where Scarlet Witch says that they will come for her, and it's Vision who says, "We would protect you." They both give each other a look, and it's kind of the start of something beautiful, I hope. This is all building on the fact that Vision is the one who saved Scarlet Witch from Ultron in Age of Ultron. I liked a lot of what we got between Scarlet Witch and the Vision, especially later in the film, when she's hurt and Vision is so distracted that he accidentally knocks War Machine out of the sky, almost killing him. He makes a mistake, something he didn't even realize he was capable of. I can say the one thing I felt was distracting was Scarlet Witch's accent, or lack of accent, or over-accent. Depending on the scene, it was on completely different levels. But I think eventually she settled into a kind of natural-sounding voice, but it still needs a bit of tweaking to truly feel natural. Next up is Black Widow. Great action again. She does things I've never seen anywhere else. There's a moment in the opening action scene where she takes out multiple bad guys without even touching the ground. She also actually surprised me by joining Tony's side of the argument, which surprised him as well. Although she still manages to toe the line and appeal to Cap as well, in order to try and avoid, as she puts it, punching our way out of this. To be honest, I'd never really been behind a Black Widow solo movie before this, but after seeing her in Civil War, something just clicked for me, and I realized how amazing she would be on her own mission. Maybe teamed up with a few of the other lower-level Avengers in some kind of world-traveling espionage movie. I'm totally behind her own solo movie in the future, and I really can't believe I didn't see it sooner. Hawkeye's in this movie too, and he's kind of found his niche in the Avengers, and knows how to maximize his screen time at this point. He does a great job of infusing some humor into whatever he does, whether that be jokes about disappointing his kids, or taking on the Arrow Guy jokes that are always present. He also displays a lot of heart and intellect in short bursts of time, like his plan to immobilize Vision with his electric-y arrow, or whatever, and his drive to try and fight him even though there was one of the most lopsided battles of all time. He wasn't given a ton to do, but he leaves his mark. He's the one left to chastise Tony after the battle has ended and half the Avengers are locked up. I understand why he couldn't be a bigger part of the story, but at the same time I'm very happy with what we got of him, and I think he left his mark great in the time that he was allowed. Now on to the pair of new guys. First up, Spider-Man. Best Spider-Man ever. I'll say it. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say too much because there wasn't very much of him in this movie, and I can see how they could just take the best parts of a Spider-Man movie with him and put them in this movie. So I'm still waiting to see a full Spider-Man movie, but as of now, I like him better than the other two Spider-Mans we've gotten. Now for me, that's not saying much. I didn't love the Raimi films or the Amazing movies, and I wasn't that excited about Homecoming before this either. But then I saw Civil War, and now it's on the top of my list for upcoming MCU films. Spider-Man is everything he actually is in the comics. He's a social outsider who turned into a motor mouth when he's nervous and threw just as many jokes around as he does punches in a fight. From his introduction to Aunt May, to his interaction with Tony and his skipped over but fully grasped origin story, I loved it all. He even had better moments in the airport battle, and I can say that his suit looks and moves great. It wasn't my favorite design when it was initially revealed, but the small touches like his ever-changing eyes really suited the character and worked within the film. It just goes to show what we've known all along. Spidey just needed to be handled by his creators. He just needed a homecoming. Black Panther was a huge driving force in this movie, and Chadwick Boseman was a great choice for T'Challa, and as expected did a great job in his introductory film to the MCU. We learned a ton about his character, and witnessed his father's death at the hands of Baron Zemo. He was incredibly imposing and a force all of his own in the movie, joining in the fight largely because of his own personal vendetta against the Winter Soldier, which gave his story even more weight. Ultimately, it was the perfect story to tell in the context of Civil War. Black Panther says it himself that with so much vengeance around him and the destruction he has witnessed come from it, he can't let vengeance destroy him as well, and so he doesn't kill Zemo. The perfect end to his story within this film. We also got plenty of setup for his own solo movie, from seeing his bodyguards to the mid-credit sequence set in Wakanda itself. I am definitely excited to see what he can do with his own movie, and I cannot wait to see more of him. Rhodey is what he always is, another, less interesting Tony Stark. Of course, Rhodey is on the side of the government right away, since he was an Air Force man, but I'm sorry, I have to say this. I just haven't been able to get invested in War Machine, really on any level, since they replaced Terrence Howard in Iron Man 2. I know it's unfair to say, especially at this point in the MCU, but I can't get by the fact that Terrence Howard showed me more from his personality and spark in one movie than Cheadle has in 4. And I like Don Cheadle as an actor. I did like some things that War Machine did in this movie. I loved the addition of his electric-y bat, but it was pretty much useless and got destroyed right away. I really loved when he was flying with Spidey hanging on from the back of him. And this movie does have the best War Machine scene ever, in my opinion. When Giant Man is swinging a Mack truck at him and Rhodey just unloads everything he's got and absolutely shreds the truck to bits. Ugh, that is perfect War Machine. It's an instance of him using his strength to his advantage, something that the Russo brothers excel at with all of these characters. Now, it's kind of sad to say, but the most impactful thing that War Machine probably did in this movie was getting shot out of the sky. It really just represented the consequences of the Civil War, which is something that I'm glad we got to see for once. And I can say, I'm interested to see where his character will go from here and how this will change Rhodey in the future. Last but not least, certainly not least, is AntMan. Oh my gosh, this guy's the funniest part of the whole movie, hands down. Almost every line that Paul Rudd has is golden. From his introduction of his oohing and his eyeing of all the Avengers and his feeling of the muscles of Chris Evans, it's perfect. To his jokes as he runs through an Iron Man suit, and his genuine and amazing enjoyment of his transformation into Giant Man, he's gonna tear himself in half. Ant-Man was funnier than he was in his own movie, where I felt more like he was the straight man to his wackier friends. Rudd was actually allowed to run wild in this movie and liven up some of the action with some laughs too. Oh geez, I thought that was a water truck. Ant-Man in this movie made me appreciate his movie much more than before, and makes me want to see Ant-Man cross over with every single movie he can get his hands on. It certainly makes me a lot more excited for Ant-Man and the Wasp as well. I just hope they can bring some of the humor he did in this movie and transfer it on back to his own franchise. In summation, this movie had so much to handle. A ton of setup and plenty of responsibility of making sure that this movie was good. And yet they still knocked it out of the park. At this point in the MCU, with so many characters we already have a grasp on, they really are allowed much more room to simply tell their story and show off what these characters can do, especially when they all come together. If not for the airport battle, this would still be an action-packed, awesome Marvel movie. But including the airport scene as well, this movie is just on another level that immediately leaves you with questions as you leave the theater. Questions like, did I just watch the best movie in the Marvel Universe? Now, however people end up answering that question, I don't think I could call you crazy for thinking it is. Far from it, because it very well might be. Now, I'm sure I missed a ton of awesome things that happened in this movie, but honestly, it's because I would just be sitting here for an hour telling you all of them. This movie had so many things that were just awesome. I mean, the airport battle, oh my gosh. There was little moments with Hawkeye and Widow when they were fighting. Oh, are we still going to be friends? Depends how hard you punch me. And then Scarlet Witch throws her off. Don't pull your punches. I mean, this movie is jam-packed with awesome. And if you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. I'm giving this movie a 9.3 out of 10. The only reason this movie isn't getting a 10 is because they killed Crossbones and Scarlet Witch's accent is all over the place. I mean, there were some other little things wrong with this movie, then nothing that really took me out of it other than those two things. This movie is just jam-packed awesome, and that airport battle alone is worthy of a 10. If it was just that, I would give it a 12. Thank you guys so much for watching my review of Civil War. I hope you guys come back for my next video. You guys can watch my Batman v Superman review right here. Please subscribe. I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well. Feel free to leave a comment. Tell me what you guys thought of Civil War. Tell me, was it better than Batman v Superman? Tell me, are you crazy? Do you think it was worse than Batman v Superman? I'd really love to have discussion with you guys about that. I mean, from my perspective, I can't understand how you would think it is better than Civil War, but I'd love to hear what you guys are saying nonetheless. Thank you so much. I'll be back again soon.